Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Young Adult Materials, SLIS 757 for fall of 2018 in the week of November 5th, or election week, as it is otherwise or infamously known. And it is week 11, and we are going to be looking at some dystopian literature and some fantasy literature, mostly fantasy literature that veers into dystopia, and as our lives veer into dystopia. There's my political commentary, and I'm wearing my red for Ed. I hope you notice. All right, here we go with fantasy materials. All right, so our learning outcomes this week. In this class, the student will be able to learn about fantastic fiction and its subgenres, including science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Of course, there are sub-subgenres, but we'll get to those. And we're going to learn about dystopian fiction and the reasons why it is so popular with young adults or people who have the mentality of young adults. Hey. So, in fantastic fiction, we have, of course, straight up fantasy, the science fiction, horror, and romance. I'm throwing that in there as a little bit of an extra because a lot of these books have a romantic element or as it's a feature. Fantasy was ranked the most popular genre by teens in a 2008 teen survey. I will tell you that in my own library, it seems to maintain its popularity, or at least recently, it's maintaining its popularity. Readers experience what could have been or might be rather than what was or must be. It contains the stuff of wonder, satisfies the need for heroes and good versus evil, and classic fantasy is certainly centered around quests. This is a selective list of YA fantasy authors. There are so many, but these are not Margaret A. Edward Award winners. Hopefully you've heard of David Almond, who wrote Skellig. T.A. Barron wrote the Lost Years of Merlin series. Cassandra Clare is super popular in my library, and I've read several of her books, though don't think I've completed any of her series. But anyway, the Mortal Instrument series, and I think there was a Netflix or a Hulu, or somebody did or maybe it was HBO. Gosh, I'm losing track. Anyway, somebody did a TV series on Cassandra Clare books. There's Marie Lu, the Legend series, which my boys loved. There's Robin McKinley, who wrote Beauty and other books, including, one of my favorites. Hang on. It's The Hero and the Crown. Oh my God, I loved that book as a young adult, and that's old. That was from '84, but Beauty is much more recent. The Veronica Roth Divergent series that several of you read for the book versus movie assignment. Philip Pullman Dark Materials series. If you are Catholic, that they might offend you. In fact, the Catholic Church tried to ban those. I thought they were freaking fabulous. I loved those. Laini Taylor, Daughter of Smoke and Bone series, which I don't think I've read those yet. Golly. Anyway, there are so many more, and I'm just trying to throw a bunch of titles out here. I know this semester is winding down. You're all exhausted. Most of you teach. But hopefully one of the benefits you'll get from this class is that you will have exposure to lots of titles and authors, and you'll go, oh yeah, I've been meaning to read that. Of course, I know you all have huge stacks next to your bedside where, oh, I'm going to read that next, and then you fall asleep, if you're anything like me. Anyway, on we go. All right, and then there's the Harry Potter phenomenon. Harry Potter was released in 1997. Written by J.K. Rowling. You probably know some of the lore behind this, but she was a welfare mom and she wrote in a cafe. Scholastic paid $100,000 for the U.S. rights. Haha, they got a deal. There are 7 in the series. Sold more than 500 million copies and was translated into 65 languages. The Half-Blood Prince, 6.9 million sold in the U.S. within 24 hours. They, of course, were the great movies, fan gatherings, museum exhibits. I will tell you, I poo-pooed Harry Potter for the first 2 books, and then my dad called me up. My dad was like 72 at the time. And he's like, Laura, you gotta read these. And I'm like, oh, they're for kids. And he said, no, they're not. So anyway, my dad made me read Harry Potter, bless his heart, because he was right. They're awesome. And made me read these, and then I read them, and then my children were small at the time, and my second grader read them, and I was worried about him. But when he finished the 4th book, he said, sometimes a good person has to make a sacrifice, Mom. And so I gave him the 5th book and let him keep reading. Anyway, Harry Potter is amazing. In fact, I was late picking up my kids from daycare one day because of the last Harry Potter book, and the daycare, my daycare provider didn't charge me extra because she was like, "What chapter were you on?" Anyway, I'm a little bit of a Potter nut. Not a huge one, but pretty big. Anyway, I'm sure some of you are too, because they're just awesome. Sorry for babbling about Harry Potter. I'll try to go faster. Harry Potter's influence on children's and young adult literature. New York Times created a children's bestseller list in 2004, in part because Harry Potter was so huge. It created an explosive interest in fantasy for both authors and publishers. It created events and marketing for children's lit and YA lit. Did anyone go stand in line at a bookstore waiting for Harry Potter, a new novel to come out? It was amazing. YA novels have become longer, so publishers respect the fact that young adults will read a longer book, because they really will, or even children will. They are aimed at middle school readers, but all ages enjoy them. Exhibit A is my 72-year-old dad calling me up and saying you have to read them. It brought in illiterate readers. Kids who didn't read bought in. It also riled up some censorship issues with people who believed it was promoting witchcraft, but I believe those people didn't read the books because it's really about good versus evil. My opinion, of course. Then we have horror, the genre of monsters, ghosts, vampires, werewolves, zombies, and more. It provides escapism. It has the element of fear, which teens enjoy in the controlled reading environment, and fascination. The nature of the menace in horror, sci-fi, fantasy cannot be explained rationally. Some middle school series include Goosebumps and Cirque du Freak. High school, you've got Dean Koontz, sorry, couldn't pronounce that, Stephen King, and one of my least faves, Darren Shan, who writes gross stuff, but some kids really like it. It's gory. This book list from 2017, the top 10 sci-fi, fantasy, and horror for youth, has books that concentrate on the traditional haunted castles and UFOs, to the unconventional, alternative histories, evil toys. These novels reviewed in book lists between May 15th, 2015 and July 2016 will satisfy fans of sci-fi, fantasy, and horror. There's a nice place to start if you're not familiar with some of the sci-fi, fantasy, and horror titles, though I suspect just listening to some of your comments or reading your comments, many of you are fantasy lovers. So we're just going to say a little thank you to J.K. Rowling, who started this ball rolling with the big fantasy books, and ushered in the lovely Twilight series in 2005, which came out the same year as the Half-Blood Prince, written by Stephanie Myers, who was a 31-year-old housewife. Bella's love for the exotically beautiful vegetarian vampire Edward Cullen, a boy who had been 17 since 1918. That's a quote from Michael Cart. There were 3 more in the series: New Moon, Eclipse, and Breaking Dawn. This caused just an enormous ripple effect in young adult literature, where you had like Vampire Academy and Blood and Chocolate was a werewolf one. I'm trying to think of some other ones. I should have written them down. Anyway, you had a whole bunch of vampire books come out in short order after this, and of course you had the whole Jake versus Edward. I'm firmly team Jake, but I'm a dog person, so there you go. Then you have the zombie genre, which I totally don't get. I don't get it. Brain eating freaks me out. Maybe it's because I saw Night of the Living Dead as a small child and was traumatized. Anyway, popular zombie titles for YAs. The Forest of Hands and Teeth by Carrie Ryan, which I actually liked that book. Walking Dead, Robert Kirkman. It's a graphic novel series. No thank you. Again, zombies freak me out. Zombie Blondes by James Bryan. I had that out for Halloween, but I have not read that. Zombies vs. Unicorns, edited by Holly Black and Justine Larbalestier. Forgive me for butchering her name. That's an anthology with lots of different stories, including stories, well, obviously, about zombies. And of course, we have our classic science fiction. Different from fantasy. I like this quote from, or the differentiation by Orson Scott Card, who has his own issues, but we can talk about that some other time. It's a matter of rivets versus trees. It is speculative fiction based on the real world. That's from Robert Heinlein. And it is not quite as popular as fantasy. It is ranked 7th in a teen survey. So there are many types of science fiction. Of course, there is time travel, the classic being A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. There's a graphic novel adaptation of this also available, and of course the movie that had Oprah Winfrey in it that came out recently. Was that last year? I still haven't seen it. I still need to see that. Anyway, Aliens, Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card, Interstellar Pig by William Slater. You've got cyberpunk, concern about the future impact of advanced technologies. Neuromancer by William Gibson is one title that I would put in that category. I would also say Feed by M.T. Anderson is another title that would fit in that category. Feed talks about having an internet feed in your head so that marketing is on all the time. Oh my God, that would drive me bananas. Anyway, steampunk, one of my favorites. A setting where steam power is widely used, industrial science fiction with a Victorian setting, which would include Airborne by Kenneth Oppel, Leviathan by Scott Westerfeld. My kids, both my boys, loved that. I think there's several in that series. I think the next one's Behemoth. And World Shaker by Richard Hartland. I read that, and the follow-up, which was Liberator. I think there's a third one. I haven't gotten to it yet. Anyway, lots of different types of science fiction. Of course, there are utopian novels where an ideal world is represented. It is speculative fiction, and it must contain at least two major elements: the developmental narrative and a consideration of the political organization which maintains the utopia. But many novels that are considered utopian are really dystopian, because once you start looking behind the curtain, you see that things aren't quite what they seem. A little definition of steampunk, if you're not familiar with it, though I would guess that most of you are. It is a subgenre of speculative fiction, usually set in a Victorian or quasi-Victorian alternate history setting. Another book I can think that falls into this, it's like a steampunk horror, is The Haunting of Eliza Bell Cray by Christopher Wooding. I think it's fantastic. It kept me up for hours. Could be described by the slogan, what the past would look like if the future had happened sooner. It includes fiction with science fiction, fantasy, or horror themes. A little bit more on steampunk. Author K.W. Jeter coined the term steampunk. There's an anthology by Kelly Link and Gavin Grant called Steampunk, an Anthology of Fantastically Rich and Strange Stories. I do have a copy of this. I still haven't read it. Tisk tisk. Anyway, my TBR pile is ginormous. And another big fantasy writer that you might recognize is Suzanne Collins. She originally was a writer for children's television. Isn't that kind of a hoot? She wrote for Nickelodeon. She wrote the Underland Chronicles. Gregor the Overlander is the first one. I thought these were great too. They're super fun. It was the first of 5 in a series. It was on the New York Times bestseller list. It was inspired by Alice in Wonderland. They were really, really fun. My boys loved those too. And I think I actually read the whole series. I don't always read the whole series because I'm always trying to plow through stuff so that I can read more. And I lose interest in series unless they're really good. So the fact that I finished Gregor the Overlander might tell you that they were pretty good. Suzanne Collins was also considered one of Time magazine's most influential people of 2010, which is pretty cool. Okay, so Suzanne Collins, of course, had done well with the Gregor the Overlander series, but then she wrote The Hunger Games. Woohoo! So she was inspired by mythology, Theseus and the Minotaur, reality television, and her father's career in the Air Force, because she was certainly concerned with the effects of war. Hunger Games is set in a futuristic dystopian society with an over-controlling government. It won tons of awards, not just Hunger Games, but the series. So the titles in the series won some of these, all of these awards distributed among the titles. I hope that was clear. Best book for young adults, teens top 10 New York Times bestsellers, USA Today bestseller, best books lists for School Library Journal, and Publishers Weekly. These were highly recognized. All right, upcoming assignments. Read the articles in the required reading list. Read chapters 12 and 13 in your CART textbook. Look over the PowerPoint that's up this week that I borrowed from Dr. Gavigan and Dr. Gann. Your book talk assignments are due by midnight on November 15th. Keep posting on discussion boards, and I will get some more comments up shortly. Your final literature logs are due by midnight on December 6th. So you have, after you have the book talk assignment, you've got a little gap going on. I will be posting another discussion board, not required. It's going to be like a little extra credit discussion board. So just to give you an opportunity, if you felt like you missed some points along the way and you want to post to that discussion board, that will probably go up the week before lit logs are due. So, or I'll put it up and it'll be due then if you want to try and earn a couple extra points. It's not a whole lot of points, but it's just if you missed a discussion earlier, it's a way to make up some. Okay, so read your articles, make sure you get your book talk assignment in. Those assignment sheets are now up. Sorry, I thought I had put them up and I haven't. And I will also make sure I get up for you tonight the slot where you can turn in your lit logs if you want to get that in early. Like I said, you're going to have like a 2-week little gap there where you don't have anything due that's required. That should give you plenty of time to tie together some loose ends, do your reading, and not feel stressed out, hopefully, at the end of the semester, because I don't know about you, but I'm feeling pretty gassed right now. So anyway, follow directions on the rubrics. There's a rubric, there are directions, there's directions for how to do a podcast or vodcast. You can always just use the camera on your lovely little laptop like I do because it gives such great pictures. Anyway, I hope if you're confused, send an email. I've tried to get, I've caught up on emails from you guys at the moment, I believe. So carry on, and questions, send me an email, all right? And again, one lecture this week, but there is a second PowerPoint up there that I would like you to review that's on dystopian literature. All right, have a good week.